The autumn sunset painted the sky in fiery hues as Beatrice Garrison clutched her worn leather satchel, standing alone on the wooden platform of the Del Rio train depot. Her heart sank with each passing minute as the Texas dust settled around her, and the station master cast increasingly sympathetic glances in her direction. The last passengers had long since dispersed, leaving her stranded in a town she'd never set foot in before, thousands of miles from her Boston home. The year was 1878, and Beatrice had traveled across the country to marry a man who, it seemed, had decided not to show up. "Last train's gone, miss," the station master called, locking the ticket window. "Reckon whoever you're waiting for ain't coming tonight." Beatrice swallowed hard, forcing back tears. At 22, she had left everything behind her teaching position, her small circle of friends, her elderly aunt, all for the promise of marriage to a man she'd corresponded with for 8 months. Henry Blackwell had written such beautiful letters describing his cattle ranch outside Del Rio, Texas, painting pictures of a life together that had seemed perfect for a woman seeking adventure and a fresh start. The station master shuffled away, leaving her truly alone as darkness began to fall. The platform lights flickered to life, illuminating her solitary figure in the gathering twilight. "You've been standing there for near 3 hours now," came a deep voice from behind her. Beatrice turned, startled to find a tall man leaning against a post, his face partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He stepped forward into the lamplight, revealing features weathered by sun and wind, yet strikingly handsome with keen eyes that studied her intently. "I'm waiting for someone," she said, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her voice. "Blackwell, I reckon," he replied, causing her eyes to widen in surprise. "Whole town knows he invited an Eastern bride to come. Also knows he lit out for Mexico 2 days ago with a widow from San Antonio." The blunt words hit Beatrice like a physical blow. She staggered slightly, her gloved hand reaching for the bench beside her. The cowboy crossed the platform in 2 long strides, steadying her with a gentle grip on her elbow. "Name's Garrett Kincaid. I own the Double K ranch neighboring Blackwell's spread." He paused, his eyes softening as they met hers. "Truth is, Miss Garrison, I've been waiting all my life for someone like you to step off that train." "How do you know my name?" Beatrice asked, her voice barely audible. "Small town," he answered simply. "Word travels." He glanced at her luggage. "You got nowhere to go tonight, and the hotel in town's no place for a lady alone. My sister Martha runs a boarding house just up the street. I can take you there if you'll allow it." Beatrice looked at this stranger, this cowboy who'd apparently been watching her, waiting for her, and considered her limited options. Night had fallen completely now, and with it, the reality of her predicament. "Why would you help me, Mr. Kincaid?" she asked, studying his face for signs of deception. "Because Blackwell's a fool and decent folks don't leave women stranded in strange towns," he replied. Then, more softly, he added, "and because sometimes life gives you a second chance at something you never thought you'd find." Something in his earnest expression made Beatrice nod her acceptance. As he lifted her heavy trunk with ease, she couldn't help but wonder if perhaps her journey had brought her to the right place, after all, just not to the right man. The boarding house was a neat 2-story structure with warm yellow light spilling from its windows. Martha Kincaid proved to be a robust woman in her 30s with Garrett's same direct gaze but a more expressive face. She welcomed Beatrice with immediate sympathy and no intrusive questions. "You'll stay here as long as you need," Martha declared, showing her to a clean, comfortable room. "My brother told me about your situation, that Blackwell never deserved a woman willing to travel so far on his account." Later that evening, after a simple but hearty meal, Beatrice sat on the porch with Martha, watching as Garrett loaded supplies onto his wagon in the street below. "He's a good man," Martha said, following Beatrice's gaze. "Too good to be alone all these years. Has he been waiting long?" Beatrice asked, curious about his earlier comment. Martha's laugh was gentle. My brother's been waiting his whole life, though he might not have known it until today. She patted Beatrice's hand. Rest now. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out what comes next. That night, Beatrice lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the distant sounds of the Texas frontier town. She had come west with such certainty, such naive hope. Now everything lay in ruins, or did it? The memory of Garrett Kincaid's steady gaze kept intruding on her thoughts of failure and betrayal. "I've been waiting all my life," he had said. What had he meant by those words? Morning brought clarity and purpose to Beatrice. She had not come all this way to turn back defeated. If Henry Blackwell had abandoned her, then she would make her own way in this frontier town. She dressed in her simplest day dress and went downstairs to find Martha kneading bread dough in the kitchen. "I need work," Beatrice announced. "I was a teacher in Boston." "Perhaps the local school, Del Rio's schoolteacher, is a Mr. Peterson. Been here 15 years, Martha replied. "But they're looking for someone at the Mercantile who can keep books and help the womenfolk with their selections." By noon, Beatrice had secured a position at Wilson's Mercantile, beginning the following day. The proprietor, Harold Wilson, had been impressed by her refined manners and education. She returned to the boarding house feeling accomplished, only to find Garrett Kincaid waiting on the porch. He stood when he saw her removing his hat. "Miss Garrison, I hope today finds you better settled." "Mr. Kincaid, yes, thank you. I've found employment at the Mercantile." Something like surprise, then admiration crossed his face. "That was quick work." "I don't believe in wasting time feeling sorry for myself," she replied, though the hurt of Blackwell's betrayal remained fresh. "I'm glad to hear it," Garrett said. After a moment's hesitation, he continued, "I've come to invite you to Sunday dinner at my ranch. Martha will be there too, of course. Thought you might like to see a bit of Texas beyond the town limits." Beatrice studied him, this man who seemed so different from the smooth-talking Henry Blackwell whose letters had wooed her. Garrett Kincaid was straightforward, his weathered face showing every emotion plainly. "I would like that very much, Mr. Kincaid." His smile transformed his face. "I'll come for you both after church, then." In the days that followed, Beatrice threw herself into her new position at the Mercantile. The work wasn't challenging for someone with her education, but it kept her busy and introduced her to the townspeople. Some regarded her with curiosity. The abandoned Eastern bride was already the subject of gossip, but most were kind, especially once they saw her efficiency and willingness to work hard. Sunday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Beatrice wore her best dress to church, a deep blue that complemented her fair complexion and auburn hair. She felt Garrett's eyes on her throughout the service, but kept her own gaze resolutely forward. The Double K Ranch lay 10 miles outside Del Rio, a sprawling property with a modest but well-built main house, several outbuildings, and seemingly endless pastureland where cattle grazed. As they approached in Garrett's wagon, Beatrice couldn't help but compare it to the grand estate Henry had described in his letters. "It's not much compared to some spreads," Garrett said, as if reading her thoughts, "but it's mine, free and clear." "It's beautiful," Beatrice replied sincerely. "How long have you been here?" "Built it up over 12 years, he said, pride evident in his voice. "Came to Texas after the war with nothing but determination and the skills my father taught me about cattle." Inside, the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture, colorful quilts, and bookshelves lining one wall. Beatrice moved to examine the titles, a mix of practical manuals, history books, and well-worn classics. "You read Dickens?" she asked, surprised. "Winter nights get long out here," he replied. "Not much else to do but read when the work's done." The dinner Martha served was abundant roast beef, potatoes, fresh vegetables, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, and Beatrice found herself laughing more than she had in months. Garrett spoke of his ranch, the challenges and rewards of the cattle business, and his hopes for expanding his herd. After the meal, he offered to show her the property. They walked side by side with Martha discreetly remaining behind. "That's Blackwell's land there," Garrett said, pointing to the distant horizon. "Or was. Bank's likely to foreclose now he's run off." Beatrice felt a pang, not of loss, but of having been so thoroughly deceived. He never owned a successful ranch, did he? He had land and some cattle, but he was always looking for easy money, not willing to put in the work. Garrett glanced at her. "That why you agreed to marry him? For the prosperous ranch he claimed to have?" "No," Beatrice said honestly. "I agreed because he wrote beautiful letters about building a life together. The ranch was secondary." She paused. "My parents died when I was 16. I lived with my aunt after that, taught school, did everything properly. But I wanted more than Boston could offer me, a family of my own, adventure, open spaces." "And now?" Garrett asked, his voice softening. "Now I'm learning that adventure sometimes comes in unexpected ways," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. Over the following weeks, Beatrice settled into life in Del Rio. Her position at the Mercantile expanded to include teaching reading to several of the shopkeepers' children in the evenings. She moved from Martha's boarding house to a small rented room above the milliner's shop, establishing her independence. Garrett Kincaid became a regular visitor to town, finding reasons to stop by the Mercantile whenever he came in for supplies. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. He brought her books from his collection. She saved newspaper articles about cattle breeding that might interest him. One evening in late October, Garrett invited her to attend the harvest dance with him. It would be her first social event in Del Rio, and despite her lingering wariness, Beatrice found herself looking forward to it with anticipation. The town hall had been transformed with autumn decorations, lanterns casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Beatrice wore her green silk dress, the one she'd intended to wear to her wedding, reworked slightly by the local seamstress. When Garrett saw her, he stopped in his tracks, his admiration evident. "You look beautiful, Miss Garrison," he said, offering his arm. "I believe, Mr. Kincaid, after all this time you might call me Beatrice," she replied with a smile. "Then I'm Garrett to you," he returned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The music started, and he led her onto the dance floor. For a cowboy, he moved with surprising grace. As they twirled among the other couples, Beatrice felt something she hadn't expected, a sense of belonging. "You're fitting in well here," Garrett observed as they paused for refreshments. "People speak highly of you." "I'm trying," she admitted. "It's different from what I imagined, but not in a bad way." He seemed about to say more when a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A man stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, his clothes dusty from travel. Beatrice felt her blood run cold as she recognized Henry Blackwell. The music stopped abruptly. Blackwell's eyes scanned the room until they found Beatrice. His face broke into an ingratiating smile as he staggered forward. "There's my bride," he called, his words slurred. "Come to claim you at last, my dear." Garrett stepped protectively in front of Beatrice, but she placed a hand on his arm and moved forward to face the man who had abandoned her. "I am not your bride, Mr. Blackwell," she said clearly, her voice carrying in the silent hall. "You forfeited any claim to that title when you left town rather than meet me at the depot." Blackwell's expression darkened. "Now, darling, that was just a misunderstanding. I had urgent business in San Antonio with a widow," Beatrice finished for him. "Yes, I heard all about your urgent business." She was surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. "Please leave, Mr. Blackwell. You're interrupting the dance." Blackwell's face contorted with anger. "You think you're too good for me now, taken up with Kincaid, have you?" He lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. "I paid for your train ticket, you owe me." Before Garrett could intervene, Sheriff Morgan stepped between them, his hand on his gun. "That's enough, Blackwell. The lady's made herself clear. Time for you to go." Two deputies flanked Blackwell, firmly escorting him out despite his protests. The music tentatively resumed, but the mood had been broken. Beatrice stood trembling, more from anger than fear. "Are you all right?" Garrett asked, his face tight with concern. "Yes," she said, rubbing her wrist. I just need some air. Outside, in the quiet darkness beyond the lanterns, Beatrice took deep breaths of the cool night air. Garrett stood silently beside her, offering his steady presence without pressing her to speak. I feel so foolish, she finally said. I believed every word he wrote. You're not foolish, Garrett replied. You're trusting. There's a difference. She turned to face him. Why did you say that to me that first night, about waiting all your life? Garrett was silent for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. When I heard Blackwell had invited an Eastern woman to marry him, I was curious. Then I learned more about you from his boasting a teacher, educated, from a good family, someone who appreciated books and wasn't afraid of hard work. He paused. He showed me your photograph once, bragging. I remember thinking you had kind eyes. So you were curious about Henry's mail-order bride? Beatrice asked, a hint of disappointment in her voice. No, Garrett said firmly. I was curious about the kind of woman who would have the courage to travel across the country to build a new life. When I heard Blackwell had run off, I was at the depot that day because... He hesitated, then continued more softly, because I couldn't bear the thought of someone like you being stranded alone. And the waiting all your life part, she persisted. His eyes held hers in the moonlight. That was the truth, Beatrice. I've built my ranch, made it successful, but it's always been empty in ways that matter. When I saw you standing there, so brave despite being abandoned, I knew I'd been waiting for someone exactly like you. The honesty in his words touched her deeply. This was no flowery declaration like Henry's letters, but something far more real. I'm not ready to trust those kinds of feelings yet, she admitted, but I'm grateful you were there that day. I understand, he said. I'm a patient man, had to be running a ranch. His smile returned. Now shall we go back inside? I believe we have a dance to finish. As autumn turned to winter, Beatrice's life in Del Rio continued to take shape. The mercantile promoted her to assistant manager, recognizing her skill with numbers and inventory. She expanded her evening reading classes to include several adults eager to improve their literacy. She had saved enough to send for some of her books from Boston, gradually making her rented room feel more like home, and always there was Garrett. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, but his steadfast presence in her life became something she counted on. They attended church together on Sundays, often followed by dinner at the ranch. He introduced her to the joys of horseback riding across the open plains. She shared with him her favorite passages from the poetry books he brought her. One crisp December day, Garrett arrived at the mercantile just before closing time, his expression more serious than usual. I'd like to show you something, he said, if you're willing to ride out to the ranch with me. Curious, Beatrice agreed. The winter sunset came early, painting the landscape in gold and purple as they rode. Garrett led her not to the main house but to a ridge overlooking a different section of his property, where a small cabin stood. This was the first place I built when I came here, he explained as they dismounted. Lived in it while I was getting the ranch started, before I could afford to build the main house. The cabin was simple but solid, with a stone fireplace and windows facing the sunset view. Inside, it had been recently cleaned, with fresh curtains at the windows and a vase of winter greenery on the table. It's lovely, Beatrice said, surprised by the evident care that had gone into preparing it. I thought it might suit someone looking to start fresh, Garrett said carefully. Someone who wants her independence but might also want to be part of ranch life. Beatrice turned to him, understanding dawning. Are you offering me a place to live? I'm offering you a choice, he corrected. The cabin is yours if you want it, no strings attached. I know you value your freedom, your ability to make your own way, but I also know town life isn't what you came west for. She walked to the window, looking out at the vast Texas landscape now bathed in the last light of day. It's not what I imagined, she admitted. But then, nothing about my life here has been what I imagined. Is that disappointing? He asked, a hint of vulnerability in his question. Beatrice turned back to him with a smile. No, it's better in many ways, she gestured to the cabin. But this is too generous an offer, Garrett. I couldn't accept such a gift. It's not a gift, he countered. Consider it an investment in the future. Martha's been saying the ranch needs a school for the children of the Hands and neighboring properties. If you were to live here, teach here. The idea caught her by surprise. A ranch school, the cabin could serve as both your home and the schoolhouse, at least to start, he suggested. I've already spoken with several families who would send their children. Beatrice walked slowly around the small space, envisioning it filled with children's voices, with books and slates and learning. You've given this a lot of thought. I have, he acknowledged, but the decision is yours. You can stay in town if that suits you better. The care behind his offer touched her deeply. Unlike Henry Blackwell, who had promised her a ready-made life to step into, Garrett was offering her the chance to build something of her own, something meaningful. I would need to give notice at the mercantile, she said thoughtfully. And time to gather proper school supplies. Garrett's face brightened. Then you'll do it. Yes, she decided. A ranch school is exactly what this area needs, and teaching is what I love best. His smile was worth every moment of uncertainty she'd faced since arriving in Texas. As they rode back in the gathering darkness, Beatrice felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This unexpected path was becoming clearer with each passing day. By early February 1879, Beatrice had transformed the cabin into both a comfortable home and a functioning schoolhouse. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books Garrett had ordered from San Antonio. A large blackboard dominated another wall, while the main room held 3 rows of simple desks crafted by the ranch hands. Her living quarters were separated by a curtain at the back, maintaining her privacy while making the most of the space. 8 children attended regularly, ranging in age from 6 to 14, from the Double K and neighboring ranches. Beatrice found herself energized by their eagerness to learn, their fresh perspectives, and the challenges of teaching multiple grade levels simultaneously. One afternoon, as the children were working quietly on their arithmetic, Garrett appeared in the doorway. He often stopped by to check on the school's progress, but usually not during lessons. The children immediately straightened in their seats, aware of the ranch owner's presence. "Mr. Kincaid," Beatrice greeted him, "this is an unexpected pleasure." "Miss Garrison," he replied formally, though his eyes held a warmth reserved for her. "I've come to invite your students on a field expedition tomorrow if their schoolmistress approves." The children's faces lit up with excitement. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "What sort of expedition?" "One of the cows just had twin calves," he explained. "Thought the children might enjoy seeing them, and I could show them how we brand and care for the livestock. Practical education to complement their book learning." It was a thoughtful suggestion, exactly the kind of integrated learning Beatrice had hoped to provide in this rural setting. "That sounds excellent, Mr. Kincaid. We would be delighted to accept." The next day dawned clear and mild, perfect for an outdoor excursion. Beatrice led her students across the pasture to where Garrett and several ranch hands were gathered around a pen containing a mother cow and 2 wobbly-legged calves. For the next 2 hours, Garrett patiently explained cattle raising to the children, answering their endless questions with good humor and making sure even the youngest could see everything. Beatrice watched him with growing admiration. His gentle way with the children revealed yet another facet of this complex man who had become so important to her. As they walked back toward the cabin, the children running ahead, Garrett fell into step beside her. "You're good with them," Beatrice observed. "The children adore you." He shrugged modestly. "Easy to be liked when you're showing off baby animals. It's more than that," she insisted. "You respect them, take their questions seriously. That matters to children." "Had a good teacher," he replied, glancing at her. "My father was like that, patient, willing to explain rather than just give orders." His expression grew more serious. "Never thought I'd have the chance to pass those lessons on to my own children." The implications of his comment hung in the air between them. Beatrice's heart beat faster as she considered how to respond. Before she could speak, a commotion from up ahead interrupted them. Two of the boys were arguing, their voices raised in anger. By the time they resolved the dispute and shepherded all the children back to the schoolhouse, the moment had passed. But that evening, alone in her cabin after the students had gone home, Beatrice found herself thinking about Garrett's words, about the future they might point toward. A knock at her door startled her from these thoughts. She opened it to find Garrett standing there, hat in hand, a small package under his arm. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said. "I wanted to bring you this." He handed her the package. It arrived on today's mail coach. Beatrice unwrapped it to find a book of botanical illustrations. "It's beautiful," she breathed, turning the colored pages carefully. "How did you know I was interested in local plant life? You mentioned wanting to teach the children about what grows here," he replied. "Thought this might help." She invited him in for coffee, and they sat at her small table, the book open between them. As the evening progressed, their conversation flowed from plants to ranching to books they'd both read, with a natural ease that Beatrice had come to treasure. "Beatrice," Garrett said finally, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "there's something I need to say to you." She looked up, meeting his steady gaze across the table. "When you first came to Del Rio, I told you I'd been waiting all my life for someone like you," he began. "These past months have only confirmed what I felt that first day. I'm in love with you." The directness of his declaration took her breath away. This was no flowery courtship letter, no extravagant promises. This was simply Garrett, honest and straightforward as always. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he continued when she remained silent. "I just wanted you to know where I stand. The school is yours regardless for as long as you want it. Your position here doesn't depend on your feelings for me." His integrity moved her deeply. "Garrett," she said softly, "I came to Texas for a new beginning, for adventure, for the chance to build a meaningful life. I thought Henry Blackwell was my path to those things, but I was wrong." She reached across the table to take his hand. "Meeting you at that depot was the best thing that could have happened to me." "Does that mean," he started, hope rising in his eyes. "It means I love you too," she said simply. "Not because you rescued me or gave me this school, but because of who you are, a man of honor, of patience, of true kindness." Garrett rose from his chair and came to kneel beside her, taking both her hands in his. "Beatrice Garrison, I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures. But I promise to love you honestly and completely for all the days of my life. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, her heart full. "Yes, I will." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that had been building between them for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Garrett touched her cheek with wonder. "I never thought I'd find such happiness," he said. "Especially not because someone else abandoned you at a train depot." Beatrice laughed. "Perhaps we should send Henry Blackwell a thank you note." "I'd rather not," Garrett replied with a grin, pulling her close again. Their wedding took place in April, with the Texas wildflowers in full bloom. The entire community turned out for the celebration, held on the grounds of the Double K Ranch. Martha had decorated the yard with ribbons and flowers, and tables groaned under the weight of food brought by neighboring families. Beatrice wore a simple white dress adorned with lace, her auburn hair crowned with a wreath of blue bonnets. Garrett, standing tall and proud in his best suit, watched her walk toward him with an expression of such love that tears sprang to her eyes. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, their vows spoken clearly for all to hear. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed her to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered. The cabin school remained Beatrice's domain during the day, but she moved into the main ranch house as Garrett's wife. Together, they created a home filled with books, music, after Garrett surprised her with a piano shipped from San Antonio, and lively conversation. By summer, they had expanded the school to include adult education 2 evenings a week. Beatrice taught English and mathematics, while Garrett contributed lessons in ranching and land management. The Double K became known not just for its fine cattle, but for its commitment to education. Word spread beyond Del Rio. Families from farther away began sending their children to board with neighboring ranchers during the week so they could attend Beatrice's school. By the following year, they had constructed a proper schoolhouse near the main ranch buildings, large enough to accommodate 20 students. In December 1880, as they celebrated their first Christmas together as husband and wife, Beatrice had a special gift for Garrett. After dinner, as they sat before the fireplace in their cozy parlor, she handed him a small package wrapped in red paper. "What's this?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. "Open it and see," she encouraged, her eyes bright with excitement. Inside was a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties. Garrett stared at them uncomprehendingly for a moment before understanding dawned on his face. "Beatrice," he whispered, looking up at her with wonder. "Are you saying," she nodded, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach, "in June, if the doctor is correct, we're going to have a baby?" Garrett's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He gathered her in his arms, his joy evident in every line of his body. Later, as they lay in bed discussing names and plans, he placed his hand protectively over her abdomen. "When I saw you standing alone at that depot," he murmured, "I never imagined we'd be here now with so much happiness ahead of us." "Life rarely follows the path we expect," Beatrice replied, covering his hand with her own. "But sometimes the unexpected path leads exactly where we're meant to be." On a warm June evening in 1881, after 15 hours of labor, Beatrice gave birth to a healthy son they named Thomas James Kincaid. Garrett, who had worn a path in the porch floorboards with his anxious pacing, was overcome with emotion when Martha finally invited him in to meet his son. "He's perfect," Garrett whispered, gently taking the swaddled infant from Beatrice's arms. "He has your chin, and your eyes, I think," she replied tiredly but happily, "though it's too soon to tell for certain." As young Thomas grew, it became clear he had inherited his father's steady temperament and his mother's quick mind. By the time he was 3, Beatrice was pregnant again, this time giving birth to twin girls they named Elizabeth and Sarah. The Double K Ranch prospered under Garrett's careful management. He expanded their holdings when neighboring properties came up for sale, including the land that had once belonged to Henry Blackwell. With each passing year, their operation grew more successful, allowing them to invest not only in their ranch but in the community. Beatrice's school eventually became the official Del Rio School, housed in a proper building in town, with Beatrice serving as headmistress and overseeing a staff of 3 teachers. Her innovative approach to education, combining practical skills with academic knowledge, became a model for other frontier schools. They never forgot how they met. Each year on the anniversary of Beatrice's arrival in Del Rio, they would visit the train depot together, sometimes bringing their children along to tell them the story of how Mama had come to Texas to marry one man but found her true love instead. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they stood on that same platform where they'd first met, Garrett took Beatrice's hand in his. "Any regrets?" he asked, "about the way things turned out?" Beatrice looked at him, at the face that had grown even dearer to her over the years, at the silver now threading through his dark hair, at the laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of a decade of happiness. "Not a single one," she answered truthfully. "How could I regret finding everything I ever wanted, even if it came in a package I wasn't expecting?" Garrett smiled, the same smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "I meant what I said that first day, you know. I really had been waiting all my life for you to step off that train. And I'm grateful every day that you were there waiting," she replied, leaning up to kiss him as a train whistle sounded in the distance. By 1895, the Kincaid children were growing up. Thomas, now 14, was showing a strong interest in the ranching business, often riding out with Garrett to learn every aspect of cattle raising. The twins, 12 years old and as different as sisters could be, were both bright students, Elizabeth fascinated by science and medicine, Sarah drawn to literature and writing like her mother. Their youngest child, 8-year-old William, born after Beatrice had thought her childbearing years were behind her, was a curious, energetic boy who divided his time between following his father around the ranch and joining his mother in her garden. The Double K Ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the region, known for its progressive ranching methods and the education programs Beatrice continued to champion. They had built a larger home as their family grew, but kept the original ranch house intact, filled with memories of their early years together. One evening, as Beatrice sat on the porch after the children had gone to bed, Garrett joined her with 2 glasses of wine. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, much like the day she'd first arrived in Texas. "Something came for you today," Garrett said, handing her an envelope along with her wine. "From Boston." Beatrice recognized her cousin's handwriting immediately. She opened the letter and scanned its contents, her expression growing somber. "My aunt has passed away," she said quietly. "She was 92. Garrett placed his hand over hers. "I'm sorry, Beatrice. I know you were fond of her despite the distance." She nodded, continuing to read. "My cousin writes that Aunt Margaret left me her house in Boston. He's asking if we want to claim it or if he should arrange for its sale." "What would you like to do?" Garrett asked. Beatrice considered the question, looking out over the land that had been her home for 17 years. "I haven't been back east since I came here," she mused. "Perhaps we should visit, take the children to see where their mother grew up." Garrett's thoughtful expression told her he was considering the idea seriously. "It would be educational for them," he agreed. "And the ranch can spare us for a few weeks. Johnson is capable of managing things." The decision was made, and by late summer, the entire Kincaid family boarded a train heading east. For Beatrice, it was a journey back in time, retracing the route she had taken as a young woman full of dreams and uncertainty. Boston seemed both familiar and foreign to her now. The narrow streets, the brick buildings, the formality of society, all were just as she remembered, yet her perspective had changed completely. She showed her children the school where she had taught, the church she had attended, the small parks where she had walked as a girl. Her aunt's house was just as she remembered, a proper Boston townhouse filled with heavy furniture and family heirlooms. As they explored the rooms, Beatrice felt the ghost of her younger self moving through the corridors, restless and longing for something more than this confined existence. "It's hard to imagine you living here," Elizabeth observed, looking around the formal parlor with its delicate furnishings so unlike their comfortable ranch home. "You belong in Texas, Mama," Beatrice smiled at her daughter's perception. "I do now," she agreed, "but this was home once." They stayed 2 weeks, long enough for the children to experience the cultural advantages of the city museums, theaters, libraries, and for Beatrice to settle her aunt's affairs. In the end, she decided to sell the house, using part of the proceeds to establish a scholarship for young women teachers willing to work in frontier schools. On their last evening in Boston, Garrett found Beatrice sitting in the garden behind the townhouse, lost in thought. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, taking the seat beside her. "I was thinking about paths not taken," she replied. "If Henry Blackwell had met me at the depot that day, how different our lives would be." "Do you think you would have been happy with him?" Garrett asked, his voice careful. Beatrice turned to him with a soft laugh. "No, I was young and naive, but not completely foolish. I would have discovered his true nature eventually." She reached for Garrett's hand. "But I might never have met you. That's the thought I can't bear." "I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Garrett said. "Even if it had taken longer or happened differently, some things are meant to be, Beatrice." The train journey back to Texas felt like a homecoming in the truest sense. As they crossed the plains and entered familiar territory, Beatrice felt her spirit lifting. When they finally arrived at the Del Rio Depot, the very place where her Texas story had begun, she paused on the platform, taking in the sight with fresh eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kincaid," Garrett said, placing his arm around her waist. "Home," she repeated, leaning into his embrace. "The word has such a different meaning now than when I first stood here." "For the better, I hope," he said, a hint of question in his voice despite their many years together. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she assured him, standing on tiptoe to kiss him right there on the platform, much to their children's embarrassment and the amusement of passing travelers. Life continued its steady rhythm at the Double K Ranch. The children grew, each finding their own path as the years passed. Thomas took over more responsibility for the ranch operations, proving himself to be as capable and forward-thinking as his father. Elizabeth, determined to become a doctor, earned a place at a medical college in Chicago, breaking new ground for women in the profession. Sarah discovered a talent for journalism, eventually writing for newspapers in San Antonio and beyond, her articles about frontier life gaining popularity. Young William, to everyone's surprise, developed an interest in law and politics, announcing his intention to study at the University of Texas when he came of age. Through it all, Garrett and Beatrice remained the steady center of the family, their partnership only growing stronger with time. They weathered the challenges that came their way: droughts, economic downturns, the inevitable conflicts of family life, with the same resilience that had defined their relationship from the start. In 1903, on their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration that brought together the entire community. The Double K Ranch was decorated for the occasion, with lanterns strung between the trees and tables set up on the lawn for hundreds of guests, former students, neighbors, friends made over a quarter-century of life in Del Rio. During the festivities, Thomas called for everyone's attention, raising his glass in a toast to his parents. 25 years ago, my mother arrived in Del Rio, a stranger in a new place, he began. The story of how my father found her at the depot has been told so many times it's become part of our family legend. But what makes their story special isn't how it began, it's everything that came after. The school they built together, the ranch they expanded, the family they raised, the community they helped shape. Tears glistened in Beatrice's eyes as her firstborn continued. My parents taught us that love isn't just about romance, it's about building something meaningful together, day by day, through all life's challenges. So please join me in honoring Garrett and Beatrice Kincaid, whose love story has enriched all our lives. The crowd raised their glasses, voices joining in congratulation. Garrett squeezed Beatrice's hand, his own eyes suspiciously damp. Later that evening, after most guests had departed and their children were occupied with the cleanup, Garrett led Beatrice away from the celebration to a quiet spot beneath the stars. 25 years, he marveled, holding her close. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I saw you standing alone on that platform. Other times I can barely remember life before you. It's been a wonderful adventure, Beatrice replied, resting her head against his chest. Better than any I could have planned. Any regrets? He asked, echoing the question he'd posed on their 10th anniversary. Beatrice looked up at the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word, the father of her children, her closest friend, her steadfast lover through all these years. Only that we can't live it all again, she answered. Every moment, even the difficult ones. Garrett smiled, the same smile that had first won her heart all those years ago. Well, Mrs. Kincaid, I believe we still have plenty of moments ahead of us, and I intend to treasure every single one. As they walked back toward the lights of their home, Beatrice reflected on the young woman she had been, standing alone and afraid at the Del Rio depot. How fortunate she had been that day, not that Henry Blackwell had abandoned her, but that Garrett Kincaid had been waiting, somehow knowing even then what she had yet to discover. That sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with grand romantic gestures, but with simple human kindness and the courage to take an unexpected path. I've been waiting all my life, he had told her that first day. And in all the years that followed, he had proven those words true in countless ways, as they built their life together in this corner of the Texas frontier that had become, truly and completely, home.